And now, everyone, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to your host, Mr. Bob Truett.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming tonight. And for everyone on campus, for all our students online. Okay, my name is Bob Truett. I'm the program director for the Digital Cinematography program here at Full Sail University. And I'm hosting this session on Adobe Presents, an artist's journey from analog to digital to virtual and back again, with Academy and Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist Ben Grossmann. Please, let's give Ben a warm welcome.
Thanks, Bob. Hi, everybody. How are you? Glad to hear it. I'm good. I've been treated very well today. I've had a lot of exciting adventures walking around this huge campus. I don't know how you navigate it all. This is significantly larger than the state university I went to in Alaska. And it's much more concentrated on the things I actually do now as opposed to what I did in Alaska, which was political science. So I want to say thanks to Bob and Patrick from Adobe and everybody for helping bring me here so I could talk to you all and get to meet everybody today in some of the earlier sessions that we had. It's been great to see that there's a community built around the education of this industry that, to be honest with you, I've never actually seen before. It's super cool to see everybody here so excited about sharing common goals and passions, working together. And it's interesting to see so many different disciplines all in the same area meshing together. So how many people in the room right now, if I divide it down into sound and picture, how many people are sound? Raise your hand. Wow. That's it. There we go. One. That's great. Picture? All right. So we know how the marketing worked out for this one. People were like, no, there's no sound involved in this. We're just out. All right, well, good, because I'm going to talk mostly about sound. They were kind enough to give me a 4-hour session. So, Caesar, if you can lock the doors, we'll begin the presentation. All right. So, I thought, if I may, let me just first, I got a little title going on there. Let me see if I can get a slide going on here. Yes, excellent. Then let's do this. So I thought I would talk a little bit, if I may, to give a little bit of context, because I think one of the reasons why it was exciting for me to come here was that I didn't really focus on one thing in particular when I started my career. And in fact, I didn't go to school, as I mentioned, for anything that I'm doing at all. And a lot, I think, the pressure of the faculty here and the students, based on the conversations I've had today and in the past, was that people are under a lot of pressure to decide what they want to do. How many people here are a little bit stressed out about thinking about what they have to do for their career while they're going to the school? Or how many people just know? Yeah. How many here know exactly what you're going to do and you're totally full on board? You've got it, you're focused, you know exactly what you're doing. All right, well, it's not what you're going to do. I feel like it's pretty unlikely that that's actually what you're going to grow up doing. I went to school for political science in Alaska, and I had to pay for college, and so my parents had given me a camera. So I used the camera to take pictures, and I tried to get a job at the local newspaper. And so I could pay for school while working as a photographer. It seemed like a reasonable thing because I didn't really think that photography was a career that could, pay the bills. So I don't know why I thought political science would, but I figured that there was money and power in politics. So I went through school paying for it by working as a stringer photographer. When I was, in my teens, I took out a loan because I went to apply for a job at the paper, and they said, well, we're not going to hire you unless you have professional grade lenses. And I only had these cheap little plastic lenses that come with the camera when you get it. And so I took out a loan for $2,000, and I got some old, used, but high-quality lenses. And so as a result of, seeing the determination that I was going to commit to doing whatever it took to getting a job as a photojournalist, they hired me as a stringer. So I would take assignments, and I would go out, and I'd cover stories as a photographer. And at the time, it just seemed like a way to make a little bit of extra cash to pay for school. But the thing that was the most unexpected about that is that I didn't really realize it at the time, but it was probably one of the most important jobs I've ever had. And the reason why was because I couldn't draw. I wasn't a good animator. I wasn't particularly artistic. So creating wasn't really my thing. But as a photojournalist, interpreting events and storytelling is the heart of that job. So most people think a photographer's job is to take a picture that represents, the story that goes into the paper. The true pinnacle of that art form is to tell the entire story in one photograph. And so the interesting thing is that everybody thinks like, okay, you have to be a really good photographer. The fact is, photography comes later in the process. The essence of being a good photographer at the time was more about listening, learning, talking to people, understanding, figuring out what was important about that story, what was happening, where was the conflict, where was the drama, why do people care, why is anybody reading the newspaper going to be interested in what's happening at this particular event. So a bad photographer would show up, and that was me, by the way, for many years. A bad photographer would show up, turn the motor drive on the camera, and just start plowing through rolls of film. We used to have film in these things called rolls, and you put it in the camera, and then you had to process it, and the whole thing was a lot of commitment. Now you can shoot thousands of pictures, and then you have commitment the other direction and try and figure out which, if any, are good. But at the time, you would panic, and so you would go to an event, and you'd be like, here's a wide shot, here's a tight shot, here's a close shot, here's a shot of this person, that person, this person, and you'd shoot everything, and then you run around with a notepad, and you write down everybody's names, and you try to write down like what they looked like so you could find them in the picture later, because you couldn't just look at the picture and be like, okay, picture number 1 is Bob, and picture number 3 is Janice. You'd write it all down on a piece of paper, you try to remember what was going on, and then you go cover 3 other assignments. Professional photographers would show up and never take their camera out of their bag until they had spent a few minutes talking to everyone, walking around, stroking their chin, getting to know what was happening, and understanding where the essence of this story was. And then, because every single picture took work, you had to process the chemicals and shake the thing and dry the negative and print the thing and contact sheets and then decide which one was best. A professional photographer would just wait until they knew exactly what they were going to do, and then they would shoot the perfect picture that would tell the story in as few frames as possible. So for coverage, they'd get a wide shot, a tight shot, a detailed shot, maybe some interesting exchange between 2 people because people was the most important and popular thing that anybody wanted to look at besides puppies. So what I realized was that running in blind and trying to hose the place down with film was not really the essence of storytelling. It was like shoot first and then ask questions later. You try to find the story within the material that you captured. But as I got more mature as a photographer, I realized it wasn't really about photography, it was about storytelling. And it was about trying to capture the essence of what was happening and the important players and what they were doing. So it kind of taught me to slow down a little bit. Now, coincidentally, this happened right around the same time that the first digital camera came out, which was like 1992-ish. So probably around the time some of you were born. Canon came out with this, no, it was Nikon, and it was a special film back for a film camera that was a regular SLR, and the resolution was 640 by 480. The camera took 2 hands, it was this big, and you took professional lenses, and you had to hold it up, and it came in a suitcase, and you had to like plug in a cable and charge the camera up, and you'd shoot a picture, and it was like 640 by 480. Like, that was like the pinnacle of resolution. We couldn't really print those pictures in the newspaper, but the Associated Press wanted us to test out the equipment in the cold, Arctic environment in Alaska, so that they knew that if they did roll it out mainstream, it would work. So I got really good at shooting pictures, and I was still just using this to pay for school. And I realized that because I had stopped just motor driving the story, and I started understanding what was happening, I got to know the people involved. And so common people turn up in the same sorts of things. You get to know the firefighters, you get to know the police, you get to know the mayor, you get to know the local judges. You get to know all the people that fit in this town and how they all interact. So as a result, because they knew I was a photographer and they knew it was my job to cover stories, they would call me in advance of something happening. So what happened was I would have the police at 2 o'clock in the morning call and slip me a note, which, by the way, wasn't on a mobile phone because I didn't have one. It was like on a landline. And they would say, we're going to do a drug bust at such and such time at such and such place. And so I could jump out, grab my camera equipment, and sometimes I would get there before the cops, which is really awkward if there's a drug deal going on and you show up prematurely. So you would cover the event. And so it's like as soon as the cops would show up, you'd get the picture, you'd get the shots, you'd get all that stuff. And then the television crews would come right about the time when I ran out of film and was ready to leave. So this happened enough that the news director for one of the television stations was like, who is that kid who is always leaving when we're arriving and he always has the shots already? And why is the newspaper doing better coverage photographically of our stories than the video teams? Like, we can shoot and edit and put it on the air right then. Like, we got to get that kid. So they made me an offer and they were like, you need to come be a video cameraman and work at the television station. And I had never operated a video camera in my life. And truth be told, I grew up in a log cabin in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. I mean, people from my hometown will take offense to saying that's the middle of nowhere, but the population is about 1,600 people. So, like 2 classrooms here. And the next stoplight was about 100 miles away in either direction. The next stoplight. There wasn't even a stoplight in the town. So we didn't have a television when I grew up. So getting a job for a television station was kind of weird because I'd never had a TV, so I wasn't really watching any of the programs. So I said no, and then they talked me into it, and then I took the job. So I showed up on the first day, and they were like, here's your assignments, and here's your equipment. And it was basically that camera package, but all in the original cardboard boxes, about 20 or 30 years older than that one, but same basic idea, in the cardboard boxes with the instruction manual on it and a list of assignments that needed to be shot that day. So I had less than 2 hours before my first assignment to crack all the camera equipment out of the cardboard box and plug it all in. And the people who owned the TV station were like super proud of the fact that they bought a new camera, because you can just imagine there's not a lot of money going into television production in Alaska. So put that together, ran around, shot video for a while, and as anybody knows, if you shoot video, you got to edit video. It's kind of comes with the course. When you get into digital cinematography, you get into the movie business, or you get into broadcast engineering, things start to become a little bit more compartmentalized. But here at Full Sail, I can imagine that if you are shooting, you are also cutting. So we had to learn how to cut. And at the time, there was no non-linear editing. Today, you probably go, what even is linear editing? But at the time, editing was stick a tape deck, or a tape in this tape deck, and a tape in that tape deck, and then a blank tape in this tape deck, and then use wheels and buttons to like record one and record the other, and cut between 2 different takes until you could edit the whole piece together. It was very exciting, and a super laborious process that failed a lot. So I got into making TV commercials because I was like, hey, I'm not making a lot of money as a video cameraman, but there's all these local restaurants and car dealerships that need TV commercials. And the guy who owns the TV station, his problem is he can't sell advertising because nobody can make TV commercials. So TV commercials at the time basically consisted of somebody in the control room throwing up a slate and typing words into it like "Eat at Joe's" or Geraldo's Italian Restaurant with a phone number and an address. And so I was like, I can use all this news camera equipment and I can go shoot TV commercials. And now in retrospect, this seems like remarkably underpriced. But at the time, I could make a 30-second TV commercial for $300. And that was like premium cash. I mean, I could spend that on all the drugs I could possibly imagine. $300 was a lot of money. So, and the TV station owner didn't particularly care if I made money on the commercials because he made money on the advertising. So I got a couple of buddies, and we just ran around and shot TV commercials at $300 a pop, nonstop. Sometimes we'd do 2 or 3 in a day, and you get really good at like just rocking through these commercials. Now, I'm telling this portion of the story because iteration, I discovered later, is very important. And sometimes you can think about, well, I don't want to make total shit. I need to spend a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to do this and plan it out and strategize. I got to be honest with you. Grab a camera, press red button, point at stuff, and start learning. Because it's only from repetition and iteration and banging out commercials that you're going to start learning. By the time I left that job, there were like a whole shelf of 60-minute tapes, each of which was full of 30-second commercials. We shot, I think it was more than 2,000 30-second commercials in almost no time, because we were doing like 3, sometimes 5 a day. It's like as long as there was light, we could shoot commercials. And it was only from doing hundreds or even thousands of these commercials that you like start to improve your skill set, and you pick up on little things like, oh, now I can do a smooth pan, now I can do a smooth dolly, now I know exactly what to shoot when I get there, I know when the light is perfect, I know what angle the car should be at, I know how to shoot people so that they don't look like absolutely horrific in fluorescent lighting. So all these iterations got it to the point where I was like, I could do this so much faster if I didn't have to A/B roll edit. So the owner of the TV station loaned me $46,000 to buy one Avid. I don't know how much they cost now, but then they were a lot of money. And so it was like one of the first Avids in the entire state of Alaska, and I couldn't afford the insurance, I couldn't afford the maintenance, I couldn't afford the support, so that meant that I had to become like an Avid certified engineer without the certification part. So basically anytime it broke, which was every time you used it, you had to keep things fixed. Now, fortunately, around the same time, I discovered After Effects and Photoshop. And it was actually, at the time, there wasn't even Premiere in that particular incarnation. And what I really wanted to do was get all those graphics, because now we were making awesome motion graphics, but I had no way to get them onto the commercials. So getting an Avid was what that was about. So we finally got an Avid, and that meant that we had a computer that was actually hooked up to the video editing situation so that we could make commercials that actually had Photoshop graphics in them. Previous to that, I literally, and this is a true story, would print things out of Photoshop onto that transparent paper that you can get for your printer, and I would film them with the camera, and then I would like chroma key them on top of other video. That was how we made the titles. Not much has changed. That's still basically how we do it. But so we finally were able to get like After Effects stuff pumped into this, and we did some pretty cool stuff. So by jumping around, we had to, of course, do the audio mixing and the sound and the music, and we had to do the voiceovers, and it was really just all these iterations of banging out tons of commercials and figuring out what worked and what didn't. And so eventually, once you can do all of those things, you can basically become a producer. So somebody came from Georgia, and they were like, Alaska's beautiful. There should be television shows about Alaska. And I was like, yeah, it's totally awesome. Like, you could do all kinds of stuff. At the time, there were no TV shows about Alaska. I don't know if you've seen television lately, but there's like channels about Alaska. And so there were no TV stations, and the guy was like, we need somebody who knows this state and knows how to shoot video and knows how to cut and knows how to do all this stuff. And I'm like, I can totally do this. So he hired me as a producer, which basically meant that he didn't have to pay me very much, and I would do everything. So shooting, cutting, sound mixing, traveling around the state, all this kind of like Mortal Kombat film production type stuff. And it was awesome. Eventually, though, like, I got tired of carrying all the equipment and tired of shooting all the stuff, and there was a contest that the Fox television station was offering, and there's like, because we're in this tiny little place in Alaska, they're like, whoever wins the contest for increasing the market share the most, which means the most people increase per year watching that station against the other affiliates, will win a trip to Los Angeles to film red carpet interviews at the Emmys. And it was like, oh snap, I've never been to California, this is gonna be awesome. So we busted our asses, and because we were such a small town, I didn't really have to get that many people to start watching the television station. So we did awesome graphics packages. I went on the evening news as the weatherman on the green screen who points at the stuff, and I would just tell jokes, and that got enough people to watch because it wasn't totally boring. And so, an additional 50 people or whatever watched the program, which was like a 25% increase, and so we won the contest. So I went to Los Angeles with a local comedian, and we were the two hillbillies on the red carpet who would try to interview the celebrities. And as soon as I got to Los Angeles, I realized that the camera equipment that I thought was so awesome that I had was 15 years out of date, and everybody else had way cool stuff, and I had way lame stuff. So we were on the red carpet trying to get people to stop to interview us, and we literally looked like a couple of gate-crashing hillbillies who had no right being there whatsoever. And we figured out that at a certain point, the only reason we could get people to stop was if we said, "Do you have a second to talk to people in Alaska?" And people would be like, "What?" And they would always go "Alaska? What are you doing from Alaska?" And we're like, "We're here from Alaska." They let us on the stage. We're asking people questions. So we actually got all these awesome interviews. And then people from E! Entertainment and all that kind of stuff, like People Magazine, they were all like, "We gotta hang out with the people from Alaska because they're getting all the good interviews because people stop to talk to them. So get over there and then grab them as soon as they're done." Anyways, we got to do live broadcast remotes and all kinds of awesome stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of hooked. Because this Los Angeles situation is, there's no rules. It's total pandemonium chaos. You can do whatever you want. Let's go for it. And it made it easier because it was particularly cold that winter in Alaska, and my car starter died, and there wasn't one in the state of Alaska, and I had to order one, and it was going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get there. So I said, fuck this. Somebody push this car until it starts, and then I'm driving to California. So I threw all my stuff in the trunk, push-started the car, drove to California, didn't shut the car off until I got to San Francisco, which is I don't know, thousands of miles or something like that in the winter. It was awesome. Yeah, I slept with the car running a couple of times. So, So I got there, and I was pumped up. I had myself a demo reel. I was I'm going to do commercials. I'm going to shoot. I'm going to edit. I'm going to do all kinds of awesome stuff. I think actually... I even have a slide for what I looked like. Can this thing go to the other thing? No? Maybe? My thing says it's happy. It was slightly brighter than this. Anyway, so yeah. I got down here and I realized that in Los Angeles, everything is union. And I was like, oh no, I can't get a job anywhere because I can't be an editor because there's a union, and I can't be a cameraman because there's a union. And I can't be a sound mixer even though I was a DJ at a radio station because it's union. So I was like, oh. So I got a job as a receptionist. Yeah, I got a job at a temp agency, answering phones, filing paperwork, doing whatever because rent apparently doesn't pay itself. So I did that, and it happened to be at a talent agency. Oh, look at that. This is the arc of my career right here. So one of the agents was like, "Oh, you're so good at fixing computers and stuff and cameras and things, and I know this agent who represents these people that are called visual or special effects, and maybe you could, I don't know, I can introduce you to him or something." And I was like, that'd be awesome. So I got introduced to this agent who represented visual effects artists. And, I showed him my stuff. Here's my demo reel. I had made a DVD. I learned how to make a PDF. PDFs at the time were super trendy. Nobody knew what they were, how they worked. They were like black magic. And if you made a PDF that had a link embedded into it that went to a video online that didn't completely suck because you knew how to use compression to make the video stream over the internet, that was So I did that, courtesy of all my favorite Adobe products. And then the guy was like, "Listen, you seem like a nice kid. I can't possibly represent you as an agent because you have no experience. You have questionable skills. You seem to be able to do a lot of things, but in Hollywood, everybody wants somebody who can specialize." And he's like, I will give you a little bit of points, though, because visual effects, nobody understands. Visual effects is like the dark arts. Visual effects is a little bit of everything, and nobody really knows how it gets done. And so it's kind of chaotic, and where there's chaos, there's opportunity. And so he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to represent you, and I'm not going to get you a job as a visual effects artist, but you can work in my office, and you can make my website, and you can format the resumes of all of my clients, and you can compress all their demo reels, and maybe the right opportunity will come up. And so I was like, okay, because rent still doesn't pay itself. So I said, here's the deal. You got to send me in case you ever get a phone call and somebody you don't have a client that can fill that job, entry level, whatever it is, I don't care. You got to send me in. I was like, I got nothing to lose. And he was like, okay, we'll think about it. So a few months later, after I had totally built him a website and reformatted all of his clients' resumes and all that kind of stuff, which was super handy because it gave me the opportunity to go through all of these successful Academy Award-winning visual effects supervisors, look at their resumes, and see who was successful and who wasn't, and what they had done, and how long they had worked on it, and where they had been, and who they had worked with. And so I kind of got to analyze all these really immensely talented people in the visual effects business. And so finally, call came in. They needed a roto artist, and they didn't have anybody. And he didn't have anybody. And he was like, I got this kid in the office I can send in, but I don't represent him, so it's take it or leave it. So I go in for this job interview. It's the two owners of the company, and for reasons I still don't understand, there was a long conference table, and they were at the other end of the conference table, and I was over here. And either it just felt that way, or it was that way. But either way, that's how it was. And they said, well, where's your reel? And I was like, I don't have a reel. And they were like, well, what's your experience? I'm like, I don't have any experience. I was like, let's just cut to the chase. I will do this job better than anybody you have ever met at whatever this job is. And if in 1 month I am not doing this job to your satisfaction, I will give you back all the money you gave me. And they looked at each other and they're like, well, it's kind of hard to lose with that because roto is not exactly a high risk position. So they hired me. And then I was like, okay, sweet, now I'm in. So I had gone from making, $700 and $800 a day making all these TV commercials to now I was like, okay, I got a minimum wage job in California that still doesn't pay the rent. But I got to observe what everybody was doing. How are they doing it? What are you doing there? How's this thing equipped? And it realized that all of this background that I had in photography, in lighting, in composition, in color correction, all of these things were kind of kit and caboodle in the visual effects world. So what I decided was, and this was my sum and total strategy. I didn't go to college for this. I got nothing to lose. So I told my agent, Bob, who was now my agent in my head, but not in his. I was like, Bob, send me in on all the riskiest stuff. I want the things that are screwed up the most. I want the things that are going to fail. Because there are all these people who think about their career and they strategize and they don't want to make the wrong move and they got to do the right stuff and they got to think about whether or not they're going to do something. And I was like, I'm disposable. Just put me on the front lines and let me just do what I did in Alaska, which is churn through this stuff until I figure it out. And he was like, okay, well, I mean, you're right. You don't really have anything to lose. Worst case scenario, you go back to answering phones. So here you go. So whenever a 911 crisis call came in for whatever random thing it was, I would go in there and I would probably not know what the hell I was doing, but I would try to figure it out. And so that's basically my entire career in a nutshell. Start at rotoscoping, and then do some match moving, some elastic reality warping, work on some commercials, work on some TV, get a job on a Hong Kong kung fu movie, get a job on Spider-Man doing wire removal and paint. I was doing wire removal on Spider-Man, and the wires on this is the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, who's, I don't know, he's probably 60 now. Tobey Maguire at the time was very young, and there were wires that held him up when he swings being Spider-Man, and the wires would cross his face, and they were terrible. And I had to cut pictures out of People magazine of Tobey Maguire at parties and scan them in and then hand warp them on his face, swinging towards the camera in Spider-Man. Nobody knows I did this. I never told anyone. They were like, wow, you're really good at painting out wires. I'm like, that is a picture from People magazine that I just tracked on top of his face. So it was by any means necessary. It didn't really matter. I would figure out some brute force way to get into it. And the mantra was always get into the most complicated, impossible circumstance you could possibly find. And by doing that, I kind of built up a tolerance for being screamed at, because it happens, and for figuring things out. Because the interesting thing is that it's not really that you have to know how to warp or roto or paint or track or composite. There's some technicalities, but generally all software more or less works the same. And now most of the software is pretty intuitive and works the same. It's all of the other stuff. It's figuring out how to listen to people. It's figuring out how to understand what people want. Because sometimes you got an artist who's sitting at a desk and the director's saying what he wants, and they're just like, I only see in my head what I want, and I'm not really interpreting what you're saying except as the way I want it to be. So then I keep doing these versions, and then you keep yelling at me, and then I don't understand why this doesn't work. I was really good at empathizing with whoever that person was, figuring out what really chafed their ass, and then fix it, and then give it back to them. And so I got to move quickly, and I got to move up, and eventually I became a supervisor, and after a few more movies, a visual effects supervisor, and then because I got sort of a reputation of being the guy who wouldn't, walk away from some ridiculous challenge, I ended up working for ridiculously difficult directors. Not that they were difficult, but that they did difficult things. So I probably have some slides in here somewhere that reinforce some of what I'm saying. Eventually, after sort of getting to the point in visual effects where I felt like we ran out of impossible challenges to solve. And as a matter of fact, has anyone here seen the movie Wag the Dog? Yeah, that's right, one. One person who is not under 30. So in the movie Wag the Dog, they have to falsify a war, and so they use visual effects to do it. They hire a Hollywood producer. They need to make up a war, and then they bring in these visual effects people. I was a political science student at the time when I saw it, and I was like, wow, visual effects is awesome. They just can make all these things happen in real time, just poof, and there it is. And then when I got into Hollywood, I realized none of this shit is like that at all. It's all insane amounts of manual labor and months of rendering and chaos and bullshit. So I started working through the business. I'm like, at some point when you get to the top, it must be amazing, right? And it really wasn't. I was like, okay, well, I guess that was a lie. Visual effects is not real time, but it should be. And so at every point as I got closer and closer to the top, I was like, why aren't we doing more in real time? Why aren't we using video game engines? And so every opportunity that we had to try and use some technology like that, we would roll into the movie so that Martin Scorsese could see what he was doing. I was like, how can you make a movie when you're shooting an actor on a green screen and you're supposed to imagine what all this other stuff is, but you can't see it, and I don't even know what it looks like, and why are we shooting the movie this way? So I always worked with people who had a similar vision. So we started working on game technology, blending with cinema technology, and you may not know it yet, but there's a pretty big difference between television production, or at least there was, between television production, live television production, and film production. So why don't we just mix all these three things together? Because I had played around with video games a lot, and I had worked on television production a lot, and I worked on movie production a lot. And I was like, we should just stick all these things together. So we got into this thing called virtual production, which is the concept of taking a video game engine, putting real-time assets in it, using a real-time keyer, like from broadcast television, taking live footage out from the digital cinema cameras, and then compositing these two things together. Then you just have to track the camera footage onto the game engine background, and boom, visual effects in real time on the set, so that Marty can go, Sasha, move over there, and blah, blah, blah over there, and the moon over here, and the Eiffel Tower. And the next thing you know, the director is directing the visual effects and the actor at the same time, which is great, because how else can you make decisions about the creativity of a shot if I tell you, okay, I want you to read this book, but only the first 2 chapters, and then in 8 months, I'm going to bring you back chapter 3 and chapter 4. And then 6 months after that, I'm going to bring you, it's insane. You can't remember what's going on. Like, there's no consistent narrative there. You're trying to remember what you decided like 8 months ago. It doesn't make any sense. So we started working on that approach. We ran into a limitation with cinema being high frame rate, high dynamic range, and stereographic. And we were like, directors now are trying to make a really strong emotional connection with the audience on a physical and biological level. Right? Like, I can see it in stereo, so it feels more real. It's high frame rate, so it feels more like real life. All these things that people, either love or hate. But generally speaking, I was like, but they're all still in a rectangle, and they're all still through a lens, and they're all still forcing your head to be somewhere. And so we decided to stop. I was like, movies are going to run into a boundary. They're going to continue to be great at what they are, and they're going to continue to be great doing what they're doing, but we have to remove that rectangle, and we have to put the audience inside the movie. We had succeeded in putting the director, to some extent, inside the movie. Now we need to put the audience inside the movie and let them discover the journey for themselves. I don't clearly know how that was going to work out, but we started a company based on that concept. So now, this is that company, and we have about 63 people, maybe 64, and we've been working on combining all of those things in virtual reality. I'm very proud of the people at that company because they've earned these. So over the course of the previous few decades, all of us at the company have gotten some Oscars and some Emmys, and the other awards on the end are the best trophy that you can get for TV commercials. So commercials, television, and movies. And we have gotten a lot of cool clients, and we've been concentrating almost exclusively on virtual reality. So we've been doing things for Facebook and things for Disney, and we've done stuff for big companies. But right now, virtual reality isn't really too much of a thing. But I was super surprised when I came here to see that you have a full lab that does augmented reality and virtual reality, and you have all the latest and greatest stuff. And you have 3D printers, so you can print all this stuff. You can make custom pieces of hardware. You can engineer the stuff. There are people in the lab that I spent time with today who know how to run all this stuff and can build things and can teach you how to build things. And realistically speaking, it will be important for you to learn sound production. It will be important for you to learn editing. It will be important for you to learn digital cinema and motion graphics and title animation and animation, rigging and modeling and all of these things, because whether you use them on the movie business or whether you use them on television shows or whether you use them to make webisodes or whether you just put them all into virtual reality, you're going to need those things in the future of media. And I can't really say multimedia because people picture CD-ROMs when you say that. I don't know why. But I thought, if I may, that I would give you a few little random snippets and collections of pieces of advice that I whipped up really quickly from some of the conversations I had earlier today with students here at Full Sail, and just sort of say, these are the things that I didn't learn until way later, and I wish I had learned sooner. So that was that. That slide was supposed to come earlier. It's visual effects, so it had to render. Okay, so here. First, so everybody can wake up, I'm going to play a little video from Hugo. Pixamondo was the company that did the vast majority of the visual effects. And there should be music somewhere in here. Watch the dresser on the right. See, it slides back to make room for the cameraman. Now watch the wall. Pulled the wall back. Now watch the chair she's sitting on. It's on rails and it slides to the left so the cameraman has enough room to come out. But when you watch the movie, you don't see any of those things. Like there's no ceiling. And the boom operator has been running around behind the camera the entire time and you haven't seen it once in the shot. Everything through this door is completely computer generated. It took a month and a half to rehearse that shot. So, here's the interesting thing about that whole thing. Oh, thank you. Premature. I don't actually have control over that. Well, the thing that's cool about that movie is that everybody said it was impossible. Everybody said it couldn't be done. I will tell you right now that that movie could be done by the faculty and students at this university. Is that my phone? No. So I believe, based on what I've seen here, that pretty much everybody, if they got together, could pull that all off here. You've got all the resources and the equipment and the gear. We did stop motion animation. So like the mouse, when it spins around on the table, it's not computer generated. It was actually stop motion animated frame by frame. When you see the train going through the station, it's a combination of model miniatures, some of which are like this big, like model train, smashing through like little tiny miniature packages and things like that. All those little gags and gimmicks, we use literally every single trick you could possibly imagine to make that movie happen on budget. And we almost pulled it off. But yeah, so, okay, tips and tricks. Here, let me see if I can get this to work. Lessons I've learned the hard way. Communicate clearly. This is hands down, bar none, the most important thing you can possibly do. Clear communication is the cause of all of your successful 8-hour workdays. If you worked the weekends and you worked overtime, it was because somebody did not communicate clearly about what they wanted or what they were going to do or how they were going to get it done, and there was a misunderstanding, and that causes planning to go bad, and that is why you are working at 3 o'clock in the morning. Guaranteed. So the secret to clear communication is that you're going to need a team. I couldn't do any of those shots in that movie by myself. I needed about 300 or 400 of the most passionate people who by the end of the project would actually also have talent to get all that kind of stuff done. It's just impossible to do any of that stuff by yourself. I couldn't do it if I wanted to. So you really have to get good at working with a team. I cannot stress enough how important it is. There is no one-person show. There's no one band. Everything is an ensemble, and you have got to work together, and clear communication is the only way you're going to effectively do that in the most efficient way possible, so everybody gets what they need out of it and nobody steps on anyone's toes. When someone is talking to you, don't just hear them. You've got to listen to what they're saying and try to understand it from their perspective. Always remember that somebody telling you to do something is telling you to do it from their perspective, not from yours. So the thing that I've always found is that if I'm talking to, and you guys all get a pass because you're not on duty today. But if I'm talking to a room full of people and saying, okay, here's what Marty wants to see in this shot, and here's what, Thelma needs for the edit, and here's what, this filmmaker or that filmmaker expect from the work that we're going to do, people who don't write things down will fuck that shot up. People who write shit down will nail it the next time, and the movie will be great because of it, because we'll be able to do better work on more shots, and everybody will have a good time. It is so disheartening to see that you talk to an audience full of people who are working on the shot, but don't take any notes about what's being said, and they expect somebody else to write the notes for them and send them along. But the other people who are going to write the notes for them are not, they're like production people. They're not artists. Like, you're an artist. Write down what you understood, and then read it back. But here's the tricky part. don't transcribe exactly what was said, because now you're not paying attention. Now you're just a courtroom stenographer. You're just writing down what people said. And if I ask you, like, well, what did I just say? You can repeat it back to me. But if I say, what did I mean? You'll be like, I don't know. I have to think about it now because I was too busy writing down what you said. Spend time understanding what people are saying, and the note that you take is a very brief summary of what it meant or what you need to do about it. I cannot stress enough how important this will be for your life. It will change everything because you don't appreciate it, but like I do it, I write notes obsessively and I never even look at them again later. The mere act of having summarized the thought and written it down on a piece of paper means I can now throw it away because I have understood it. And it's super awesome. I cannot stress enough how important that would be. I would make a suggestion, although I am violating it right now very clearly, that unless you're an actor, you should stay out of the spotlight. Being in the spotlight makes you a profile target, right? So you better be really amazing if you're going to be showy and if you're going to be flashy. Let your work speak for yourself. Don't talk too much, too loudly, or too boldly. Just do great work, and you will get to the top. And the best part about not making a big scene out of being awesome is that you get all these extra bonus points because people underestimate you. They don't assume that you'll be capable of doing something that you're totally capable of doing because you didn't make a whole big scene out of it. And that's going to buy you a little bit of surprise factor where people will be happy and surprised by the quality of the work that you've done. And that feeling that you create in the audience or your clients or your parents or whoever it is that you're trying to impress with a particular thing is something that you can't quite put your finger on. Like, I'm not going to give you tips on how to blur the edges of a comp so that it looks like the most totally real, because that's what class is for. What I'm telling you is that the value of what you're doing is about contrast. And if people expect that you're going to produce nothing or produce low quality results, when you produce anything of high quality, it's that difference that has the impact. If they expect that you're the best in the world and then you produce the best in the world, well, then they go, well, of course. I expected nothing less, and I was certainly paying for it. So take advantage of that contrast. Lower people's expectations, and then over-deliver, and people will always be pleasantly surprised and happy when they work with you. If you're on a movie set, it is a classic amateur move to like be cool on the movie set, and you get your coffee, and you get your walkie-talkie, and you're hanging out, and you're shooting the shit, and you're talking about that last job that you worked on, and how crazy the hours were, and all that kind of stuff. On a movie set, people who have spent a lot of time on movie sets filter those people out right away because they know that they're amateurs. Amateurs like make it like being on a movie set is like a thing that they get because they're so good. But meanwhile, the professionals are totally working, focused on what the director wants, focused on doing a great movie, because there's no Oscar for best set attitude. There's no Oscar for I was most appreciated on the movie set. Nobody gives a shit about the process of making the movie at all. All that matters is what goes into the movie theater. And the whole time that you were goofing off, drinking a coffee, being loud, or distracting anybody else from working, that came off the screen. So we always talk about, in the movie business, you talk about things being on the screen or off the screen. Did you put that money on the screen, or did it fall off the screen? Like, did you waste it on a dumb idea that didn't actually materialize? Or is it in the movie? Can I point to it and say, that was worth it? And you always want to be a person that they point to and say, that person was worth it. I can't make the next movie unless that person is involved. And it happens all the time because you get filmmakers who are like, well, I'd love to make this movie, but I can't make a movie without these people and this person and that person. And when you're part of that crew, and they'll hold the production of a movie pending your availability, it's not because you were the most liked person on set. It was because you were the person who never stopped working to make the movie better. So pay attention to everything that's happening around you. Always be ready to assist. Watch other people doing their jobs and learn from everything that they're doing. And if you're all about the business, you're in good shape, and no one's going to criticize you because they see that your passion is towards the same thing that they have. You might make some enemies sometimes, but at the end of the day, the point is to make a great product and make a great experience. And as long as people believe that that's what you're trying to do, you'll never get fired, you'll never get kicked off the set, and you'll always get called back. So, and then another note, if the call time says 6 a.m., be there at 5:45 at least. If you're 15 minutes early, you're on time. And if you're on time, you're late. And that's just how it is on a movie set. People will show up late, and everybody hates those people, for sure. So, like I said, always putting the project above yourself will essentially make you invincible. I have gotten into, and I usually don't get involved in politics, even though I went to school for it. But if the director knows that your heart and soul is to put the movie above yourself, and that you are only working for the good of the project, and that you are trusting in the director's vision or the cinematographer's vision, and by the way, it's not always the director, it's not always the cinematographer. Somebody on that damn movie is responsible for making that movie great, and sometimes it's despite the director's best efforts. But once you figure out who that person is that believes in the movie more than anybody else, follow their lead and go 110% and make all of their dreams possible. Because then when you get into trouble and somebody tries to fire you, the director or the producer or the cinematographer will say, no, you're fired, and you don't have to worry about it. Because they know that, hey, that kid comes in early and leaves late and does everything that can possibly be done to make this movie better. They're doing things that aren't even their job. And I'm not getting that kind of dedication out of anybody else on this set, so you're not fucking with that kid. You're not messing with that kid. There's actually a movie called The Kid Stays in the Picture, which is kind of similar about a movie producer who does that. So that's the kind of attitude that you want to have. There's, no I in team, but you should be prepared to be the only person left. It's happened a lot where if you have that kind of focus and that kind of dedication, and it's not easy and it's not, natural, you just have to mentally in your head say, I will do this. And that's that. And you can be the first person in and the last person out, whether it's 16 hours a day or 58 hours in a row. I have shot on movie sets for 58 hours in a row going. It doesn't happen very often because it's really expensive for all the union people. But generally speaking, like that kind of dedication, you choose to do it. You don't have to do it. No one's forcing anybody to do crazy stuff like that. But it pays off, and for me, it paid off. That kind of dedication worked out perfectly, and I strongly advise it as the fastest way to accelerate your career, learn, and push your envelope of comfort. This is a picture of a puppy, because I had too many words in a row, and if you don't have a picture, people start to just tone out, and so this is a puppy. It kind of looks like Snoopy. His name is Merlin. Next slide. So when you get to Hollywood, the first thing you do is wet your pants, because there are some sickly, this is assuming you go to Hollywood and not one of the other film meccas of the world, of which there are many, and you should by no means assume that Hollywood is the only place that you can do whatever it is that you're passionate about doing. Even if you were in a recording studio and you want to mix dope tracks, or you want to work on a television station in Seattle, like whatever it is, when you show up, there are going to be people there who blow your mind. They are amazing. They are phenomenal. I am humbled by these people every day, all day. I'm fortunate that many of them work in my company. They are so unbelievably talented that it's just shocking. I can't animate a stick person. And there are people in my office who during this speech would have done a 14-minute short film that could be released at Sundance. Just noodling on a notepad. So the tricky part about that is that sometimes I see people with no experience get thrown into the pool with people who have insane amounts of talent and experience. And so I want to say this, because sometimes I see people who don't have a lot of experience get really discouraged and quit. Because they come in and they go, well, Alex walks on water, and Michelle she just opens her mouth and brilliance comes out. Those people were all you. Frankly speaking, people with talent are really hard to deal with. People who are reliable in many cases, 3 reliable people will get farther than 1 talented person on almost any project, any time of the day. So don't think that you have to be insanely talented in order to get picked up to like do the next project or do the next amazing thing. And this is worth pointing out. Like, sometimes you just look at people and you're like, well, they're a genius. That's why. That's why they have these magic skills. There's not really, I've never met anybody that was naturally talented. The thing is that when you're not looking at them, those naturally talented people are up all night obsessively drawing or creating or painting or sculpting or recording tracks or practicing or rehearsing, or they're just working constantly. And I actually, I won a trophy for something one time, and some people were kind of upset about that because I was a kid. And they were like, well, I've worked for 20 years to earn my trophy. I don't know why you thought you could just get it in 9. And it was like, well, I did that by working 80 hours a week for 10 years instead of 40. So it was the same amount of time. It was just in a shorter calendar. And it's totally legit. Like, if you look at the people who are insanely talented or who are geniuses or who are naturally inspiring and all this stuff, it's the hours. They just put in the hours. They didn't go party and get drunk. They were working constantly at making themselves better. So you can do that too. You don't have to, but you can. But either way, don't let talented people intimidate you or scare you, because you can totally become them if you put your mind to it. And you don't even need to be as good as them in order to be successful. Case in point, I suck at most everything. And I'm doing pretty okay. I feel pretty happy about myself. So don't let yourself get arrogant once you do get some talent. Leave open the possibility that you could be wrong, and that's going to make your life a lot easier to deal with when you are wrong. And actually, you'll get a lot of respect from people if you can freely admit when you're wrong. Now, I'm saying this because you are all very important people. You are the next generation of filmmakers. You're the next generation of cinematographers. You're the next generation of artists and designers. And I am going to have to deal with you someday. And if you are insufferable, I will regret having not told you not to be insufferable back when you were young enough to listen. I cannot stress enough how important it is when somebody believes that they're not wrong and they can't be wrong. It is just impossible, and the project suffers. The quality of the work goes down. The team morale drops. It becomes really difficult to deal with, and for no good reason. Case in point, I'll tell you a story. One time, it was like my first time directing a big national campaign. I got hired to direct because I came up with the idea. There was a conference call, an ad agency was involved, and I threw out this idea, and everybody beat it around, and then at the end, somebody was like, hey, who's going to direct this commercial? And before anybody else could say anything, I said, I am. And they were like, okay. And so then I was the director. So I'd never really directed a national commercial before. Usually it was, my friends and I goofing off. And so I was going through the process of casting. And I was like, okay, casting. I'm going to make really informed decisions. I'm going to study. I'm going to shake everyone's hand. I'm going to look them in the eyes. And I'm going to understand their soul. And I'm going to make them the right person for this role. And it's going to be fantastic. I'm totally unqualified to be casting anything. So there were these 2 women who were more girls. And I had it all pretty pictured out. It was supposed to be the all-American girl kind of thing. And it was a Six Flags commercial. And I was like, this one, she kind of looks Hollywood. And the other one, she looks like an all-American girl. Like I could pull her out of any state in the union. And I just feel like Marcy has got it, and I'm just not sure that Kathy does. And so I was like, I'm going with Marcy. And the ad agency people were like, are you sure? Because we're pretty sure, kind of like Katie. And I was like, nope, Marcy. And so it turned out that Katie was probably better for the role, because it turned out it was Katy Perry and I cast Marcy. The good news for Katie is she dropped out of trying to be an actress the next month because she didn't get that commercial gig, and she wrote a song called I Kissed a Girl, or she kissed a girl and then wrote a song about it. I'm not really sure in what order that transpired. But my career as a director went nowhere, and her career as somebody went really well. So I had to write a letter to the ad agency people being like, you know what, you were right. And they were like, thank you. But fortunately, they did not blame me. And that's an important thing. In the movie business, I swear to God, this happens all the time, and I just want to kill people on a daily basis. Because as soon as something goes wrong, and to be honest with you, I identify these people right away, and I never hire them again. It's just a rule. If something goes wrong, and somebody blames somebody else, they're fired. That's just how it is. If somebody blames somebody else as their first instinct and doesn't fix the problem, they're never working on any show that I'm on, at least, and they're probably not working just in general because it's the wrong person to have on your team. Fix the problem immediately, not the blame. Later on, there's a thing called a postmortem. We can all decide who's responsible for screwing up that particular thing, if we even care anymore. Because the process of making movies is nothing but problems. Everything is a problem. Every day there's nothing but problems. And the entire day is about solving all of those problems by the time you give up, right? So don't waste your time on problems at all. Concentrate on solutions. And get good at taking the blame. Towards that end, money is the least important thing. And this is an important distinction. Some people go, I need to protect myself. I need to make sure that I'm making enough money. I need to make sure that I'm valued. That's sort of true. You also want to make sure that you're a good value. You want to make sure that you over-deliver. Because what happens is, if you fight for every single nickel and every single dollar and every single pay raise, you actually stunt your growth as an artist, and you stunt your growth as like an employee. And I realistically think that when I look back in the past and I go, I didn't ask for a pay raise and these other people asked for pay raises. Well, they're still doing what they were doing then. And so the money that seemed like a lot of money then is not really a lot of money now, but that's basically where they stayed. And at some point, you get to the point where people are just like, I'm going to throw 3 times as much money at this person as they could possibly ask for because they are mission critical to the movie. Your plan A sucks. Let me just tell you right now. Like, whatever you think it is when you go into the idea, like, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to start out trying to do, but your plan A is going to fail. It needs to fail. If it doesn't fail, then you didn't try hard enough to do something amazing, because your plan A should never succeed if you're doing it properly. You've got to be ready to plan quickly and have backup plans. Plan A is your safety plan. If, like, you walk away with plan A, everybody goes, okay, well, good enough. But plan B, plan C, that's where shit gets really exciting. And that's when really awesome things start happening. So all the greatest projects, they don't even remember what plan B looked like. They're on plan X by the time they get out of the movie alive. So get good at making quick plans. Things are going to change. Don't get sad about what didn't work anymore because everything kept moving. Just pick it up and keep running with it. Momentum is hands down one of the most important parts of film production. If everybody is ready to go and everybody is moving in a direction, even if things change and you're like, maybe we should be going that way now, you've got momentum going this way, pick a new target that's adjacent to that because everybody can adjust quickly and you can keep that momentum. You can get so much more done and the movie can benefit from it. This is my favorite little phrase in Latin, gladiator in arena consilium capit, which means the gladiator is formulating his plan in the arena, aka he is about to get eaten by lions because he did not stay up the night before and do his homework and think about what he was going to do. When you get there, pre-game it, know what you're going to do. Don't just show up and be like, wing it. It's like, yeah, winging it works only if you obsessively went over it in your head for the previous week and knew all the possible scenarios and you were ready to just wing it. But don't rush into making a bad decision. You take your time. And that's one of the most important questions that you can ask is, how much time do I have? Really good people that I work with on movie sets, when I say, okay, we got to do this, their first question is, how much time do we have? Because if I have 5 minutes, I'm doing this. If I have 15 minutes, I'm doing that. And if I have 30 minutes, we're doing this. And so you formulate a solution that fits the resources that you have. Early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. So you got to plan to use the best of your time. And compromise. If you say, well, I've only got 15 minutes to do this, and I really only have 15 minutes to do this, then you can come up with a great solution that works in 15 minutes. Rather than, well, I had this 45-minute solution that got aborted halfway through the process, and so now what goes in the movie, and this, I swear to you, happens all the time. You see a horrible thing in the movie, That's because somebody didn't compromise. They were like, no, it must be this. And they only got halfway there. And you're like, well, if you had chosen something different that you could have accomplished, nobody would have noticed and the movie would have been fine for it. I think this one's good. Schopenhauer, all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed, then it is violently opposed, and then it is accepted as self-evident. Watch for these phases. They will happen. I swear to God, they happen all the time. Take advice, of course, but remember that most people are idiots. And definitely ignore audience testing. Audience testing is terrible. All of Martin Scorsese's, like Thelma Schoonmaker, his editor, told me that all of Marty's greatest movies tested horribly. Like, out of a score of 100, they would get like sub 10. And so they almost didn't release Taxi Driver, which was, in the top 50 greatest movies of all times, because the audience testing was so horrible on it. There's something about asking people for their opinion that causes them to force themselves to vomit out bad information. So I very rarely ask people their opinion, and this is a little personal tip. Sometimes when you're looking at something, you're like, well, what do you think about this? For some reason, people both look at the thing together. And really, when you're asking somebody what they think about something, you should be looking at them while they look at the thing. Because I actually don't trust what people say most of the time, but I trust people's body language. And the interesting thing, when you ask somebody what they think about something, they will react in subconscious, impulsive ways that you can only detect if you've kind of trained yourself to look for those body language responses. So sometimes they'll say blah, 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 blah. And I throw all that stuff in the garbage and I go with what I saw their body do. Because that is something that people have a really hard time faking. So this is a tricky one. This is the heart of Hollywood right here. And actually the heart of the creative process. Give people what they want, not what they're asking for. This is a very dangerous proposition, but it is 100% true. What people ask for is usually wrong. What they want is something else. If people knew how to tell you exactly how to do what it was that they wanted, they would do it themselves. So they're going to try and translate what they want into something that they think that you will understand, which will probably be wrong. So spend some time thinking about whether or not, and questioning whether what that person needs and what that person wants is actually what that person is saying. If you're not sure, do both. Do what you think that person wants, and do what that person asked for. Because if you're wrong about what that person wants, then you're probably going to get fired unless you also did what that person asked for. When you get to the high end and you start working for J.J. Abrams or Martin Scorsese or any of these like top tier directors, that's how you're going to stay alive. I just threw this slide in here because I thought it was worth mentioning. I tried. It wasn't worth the money. It takes too much time, and I don't know anybody who has successfully done it. So another little quote: talent hits a target no one else can hit, but genius hits a target that no one else can see. This is about warfare, actually, but in creativity, it totally applies. Always leave open the possibility that somebody is going for something that you can't see, and be receptive to it. And when everybody is focused on what you should be doing, take the opportunity to step back and look at the problem from a completely different perspective and say, is there anything that nobody's thinking about at all? Rather than refining these little details, what if we flip the whole thing completely on its head? Like if you're trying to review visual effects shots, flop them and put them upside down. When you look at them that way, your brain looks at them as new information and it'll tell you exactly what's wrong with the shot that you couldn't figure out before. I would throw this out there. Credit is worthless when you try to take it, but it definitely has value when it's given to you, and as a result, the reverse is true. Do not forget to give credit to people who deserve it. In fact, err on the side of giving credit to people who don't deserve it, because it's probably for something that wasn't worth much to begin with, and you don't want to get blamed for it. Never hire someone who wants to be a supervisor, because they inherently make the worst supervisors. I don't know what it is, but anybody who says that they really want to supervise people is probably not a great supervisor. It's usually somebody who's supervising under protest because they're so good at what they do. And the secret to being a good supervisor is you should spend all of your time trying to replace yourself, because that basically means you're going to build a team of people who are better than you are, and that's the essence of building a great team. So just think, I want to replace myself. How do I groom each and every person on this team to be at least that good? And remember, everything that looks better with sound, but don't assume everyone has the same shitty tastes in music. Check your spelling. This is this is just valid. 3 fonts you should never use: Times New Roman, Arial, and Comic Sans. If you have only one choice of these 3, use Comic Sans, because then maybe the person will at least assume that you intended to come across like clown. All right, winding up here. If you find yourself going above version 47 on anything, consider going back and filing version 7. I swear, version 7 was probably the greatest thing you've ever done. By the time you got to version 7, you forgot which way was up. Most of getting good at something has nothing to actually do with the thing itself. And here's a puppy. Let's wrap it up there. I wanted to leave a little bit of room for questions, and I don't know if I actually did that because I thought I had...
About 10 minutes.
There, perfect. So we got 10 minutes for questions. I hope that's enough. Everybody, go. We got a microphone right there. Question. Just yell it out, and then the microphone will come to you.
Okay.
You can put your hand down once you get the microphone.
Oh, okay. I think I saw you skip through a slide that said "Don't sleep your way to the top."
Oh, no, I talked about it while I skipped through it.
Oh, okay.
Was that the question?
I thought yeah. I thought it was just like a war on naps.
No, I guess I was kind of joking when I wrote that slide, but it is sort of true. Some people do think that that is a technique that's legitimate to get anywhere, and I just am here to say that after a modestly illustrious career, I've never actually seen anyone pull that off successfully. So feel free to be prolific in your social engagements, but do not expect them to positively correspond with your career path. It was not the question I was expecting to go first, but now that the ice is broken, who wants to go next?
I have a question.
Excellent.
Okay, so my question is, with the scene or the film with Pixelmundo that you did,
Yeah.
how did you keep track of the camera in the scene? Because my understanding is that you were talking before of how you could implement your game engine and all those 3 different things into one thing.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that the scene that we're seeing around it is real time, right? So that you could tell the actors exactly what was happening and stuff like that. So like everything could be visualized.
Yeah.
So how could you keep track of where the camera is relative to where your scene is in real life?
Okay. I'm going to do this live, fast, and see if we can make it make any kind of sense without showing any confidential information. There is a variety of options that you have for that. And let me see if this is one of them. Yeah, that sort of works. Set data workflow right there would be pretty good. No. Okay. I'll show you afterwards. I have a really great chart. Let me see if I can find it right here. Okay, got it. This will work. So, I should probably throw it onto a screen. Sweet. It's a little small. All right, well, there are multiple choices that you have for real-time tracking. You can put structured light scanners or laser scanners on the camera itself that reach for key markers that they've identified that may respond to the structured light scanners so that the camera can triangulate where it is, kind of like radar, right? Radar on a plane says, bing, 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 I know where I'm at. You also can put 2 fisheye lenses on the camera. Aside from the main camera's lens, those fisheye lenses look around the object for tracking sharp contrasty points, like a real-time version of synth-eyes. If you've done motion capture tracking or anything like that, they'll triangulate where the camera is in real time and then solve and push that TSR, transform, scale, and rotation data into the game engine so that they can solve where that virtual camera is. The other thing you could do is... I have pictures of it on my phone that won't go to the screen. But the other thing you could do is you can use something like a HoloLens, which we've engineered so that a HoloLens can be used for, instead of tracking the room, it can capture all that tracking data and then wirelessly stream that back to a remote computer running Unity or Unreal, process a solve out, and then push the video back. There's a lot of ways you can do it. You can skin that cat numerous different ways. And usually, if you're on a movie set, you don't have time for one of them to break, so you're doing all 3 simultaneously, and you're picking the best one that works whenever it works.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Come on. What was that, 2 questions? Wait, we got one right there.
Hi, Hugo. Thank you for your want to say get to where you are?
I hate to say it because it's not the magic pill everybody wants.
Please say it.
Okay. It is just straight up, good old-fashioned hard work. That's it. And you can do it quickly, but you got to focus and you just got to put in the hours. You just got to work at it. You just have to want it more than anything and work. And somebody's going to see you working hard, and that's going to be like, I got to have that person. Like, that person is how we get this done. Let's just straight up work hard and never give up. Look, there's no rules. And don't let education or anything confuse you into thinking that there is a right or a wrong way to do anything. Somebody asked me a question today, what's the best way to track this shot? There's no right answer. There are no right answers for any of this stuff. We made all of this shit up on these movies, like, live. We figured out solutions. We tried them out. We failed. Do not be afraid to fail. Work really hard and expect to actually fail numerous times, and you'll be fine. But I think it's just about being fearless and working hard, and you can totally do it. I didn't even have a school with all these resources when I was growing up. Like, if I had had access to this software, I wouldn't have had to try pirating it to get it to work. And I mean, seriously, like, you got all this stuff at your fingertips. You just have to choose to want it and live in it and make it happen. Yep. So.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight, and
Thanks.
Please let's thank Ben.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.